Ron Reddick, Worcester, Massachusetts.
Or
originally from.
where did you serve?
Well, that's an interesting question. When I joined, it was right after the Vietnam War, and at that time there wasn't a war, so to speak. So it was a number of different either peacekeeping missions or small conflicts that barely made the radar on the U.S. news. A lot of it was just like training type missions that I was involved with, where we'd work with local forces and help them upskill them so they could better support their country. So it was really interesting throughout the Mideast, like Sinai peacekeeping mission, a few countries in Africa, Panama invasion, which that one did make the news, Grenada, and then the rest were, like I say, smaller conflicts that some of them I can't really talk about, but they were, like I say, things that today would probably be in the news, but back then, I say it was just a totally different era. There was a big backlash from Vietnam. The government was much more quiet on what was going on. So a lot of us just served and did our job, and that was it. My dad would ask, "Where were we at?" And I'd just say, "Check the news." He said, "Nothing in the news." I'm like, "Well, I can't say anything." Interesting.
Tell me about yourself.
Oh, that's another long subject. Grew up in Chicago, city boy. I'm a first generation American. My parents both are immigrants. My mom's from Spain, my dad's from Germany. I say it was just kind of cool growing up in an immigrant neighborhood. Chicago's got a lot of these ethnic neighborhoods. So you have the German neighborhood, you have the Polish neighborhood, Greek town. And so there was great little bakeries, and you're just doing stuff. So grew up in the big city, and my parents couldn't afford to send me off to university. So I was looking for scholarships. Actually got an appointment to West Point that I turned down because I took an ROTC scholarship. And my mom never forgave me. And even in fact, when we were cleaning out her house after she died, she still had my appointment letter framed, hanging in her house. But I went to university, graduated, became a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, cavalry officer, and that was after getting an engineering degree. So all of a sudden you're taking an engineering degree that has no relevance to the military, and you become a tank driver. And that was really cool. I got deployed over to Germany, platoon leader, so I had a group of tanks, and served there, and then I actually had an opportunity to do some advanced training and kind of progress my career up, and ended up in Special Forces, and ended up as a team leader within Special Forces. And like I say, it was a really strange time at that point. Post-Vietnam, the U.S. was cutting back on the military spending. We had all secondhand equipment. It was all, like surplus from Vietnam. Not like you see on the TV today of what the guys in Afghanistan or Iraq have, all this really cool gear. We were still eating rations from 1962. It was like we'd open up our sea rations and go, "Oh my God," And like I said, because the military was kind of forgotten. Vietnam was such a backlash, and people were so, I think, tired of the war, that when I was serving in the early 80s, it was still kind of this, anti-military viewpoint by a lot of Americans. It was reflected in the spending, reflected in what we got as equipment, like I say, old Jeeps, old gear, old weapons, old food, and let's say, but we served, we did our jobs, and it slowly started to change about the mid-'80s, and we started seeing some of the new equipment coming in. And it was just a really interesting time in my life, because I was kind of a smartass growing up, and actually kind of needed that to be a bit more grounded. I'm still a bit of a smartass, but not as bad. But let's say, I think it does teach you a lot about yourself, and the whole experience when I got into SF, their mission is was a lot different than it is today. There, it was much more of an advisory team. Where now, I think everybody looks at special forces and they think SEAL Team 6 and all this cool stuff, and they got all these TV shows. Back when I was in, it really wasn't like that. Like I say, a lot of times you work with local people. Go into a country, work with the local military. You were advisors. You were training. You were really helping them improve their skills so they could better support their country. A lot different than the missions today. And I really enjoyed it because, like I say, you were getting a chance to travel and a chance to really make an impact in what you were doing. And like I say, even that though started to change. Reagan, events within the world, a few minor invasions, and I think the U.S. people actually started supporting the military. By the time I got out in '88, it really had changed. There was much more support through the U.S. military. Let's say people, I think, started realizing what the military does, to protect them. A lot of it isn't in the news. A lot of times the military doesn't get the recognition, but they just do the job. And that's the way it should be. I think it's all volunteer military. And if you go into it, sometimes it's for the education, sometimes it's the paycheck, but everybody's going in for a sacrifice. And it's pretty cool. So I got out, renewed my tech career as an engineer, and had a pretty good life, but it's been interesting.
What inspired you to join the military?
I think, being a first generation American, kind of want to give something back. And I say it was one way for me to get a college education and kind of give back. Because you have, I say, knowing the history of where my dad grew up, getting out in '38 out of Germany, right as World War II was starting, and knowing what happened to some of my relatives and the sacrifices they were made, you kind of feel a certain responsibility, I guess, or a certain need to kind of do something for the country that's taking you in. And like I said, there's a lot of different reasons. That was part of it. Part of it, I wanted an education, and the military would give it to me. I wanted to see the world, which they let me do that too. And I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, so I thought it'd be kind of cool. And it was all of that.
How did your family and friends react to you joining the military?
Ooh. My dad was supportive. Like I say, my mom was pissed off that I didn't go to West Point. She wanted me to be a doctor. I think every mother wants their son to be a doctor, at least when I was growing up. And I didn't do that. And I didn't go to West Point. So I think I kind of disappointed her. My dad was proud of me. A lot of my friends, like I say, we grew up in the 60s and 70s, the anti-war protests. I had even protested a few times against Vietnam War. Even though I was young, got tear gassed in Chicago, and they couldn't understand why would this kid who protested and was growing up when we did go in the military. As I say, it was a huge backlash. There was just not that respect for the military then, and they just couldn't get it. A lot of my friends just couldn't get it. I lost some friends because they just thought it was so wrong that I joined the military. Oh well, my choice. I'm happy I made the choice.
What was boot camp like?
It was January when I went in New Jersey, Fort Dix, and I didn't know what to expect. And they fly you out. So I got a plane ticket, from Chicago out to New Jersey. And they pick you up in this big green bus, and you pull up in front of the barracks, and this big scary guy in this looks Smoky Bear hat, I don't know if you've seen, called the drill sergeant, walks on the bus and just starts screaming and swearing and calling us things that they're not allowed to call the troops anymore. Like, you're lower than dirt, maggot, this, that. And that was my introduction to the military. And I was like, oh, wow. And it just didn't stop. For 8 weeks, it did not stop. And you were just constantly harassed, yelled at, pushed to the limit. I made the mistake. One time we got called out at like 3 a.m. We're in combat boots and our underwear. And it's out this kind of like freezing rain, in February in New Jersey. And, the drill sergeant's going, you look outstanding. Under my breath, I made a comment about, out standing in the rain. And he heard that, and I was doing push-ups in the rain, in the cold, for it seemed like hours. But it was an interesting experience. You learn what you can do. You can do a lot more than you actually think you can. They push you. A lot of it was a lot of fun. You get to fire weapons, but you get to hump a lot of stuff too, and you're doing a lot of running. But you start developing friendships that stay with you for your life, and it's just a really interesting experience. But I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was a very interesting ordeal.
So what was the most challenging part of the training for you?
Oh, probably a combination between either jump school or the Q course. Jump school is where you learn how to skydive, parachute. And, something I always wanted to try. I thought, this is cool. Even when I was young, I'm like, that'd be really cool, So I went to jump school, and they do this tower training and all that, and it's like, this is pretty cool. It's all a lot of fun. And then I did my first jump, and you're up in a C-130, and you're clipped in, and you walk out the back door, and you just get sucked out, and, this is kind of cool. Your parachute opens, and that first jump, I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. The second jump scared me shitless, because you knew what to expect. It was like, oh my God, this is not what I really expected, and you're standing there and you're shaking and you're scared, and it's like, I know what's going to happen. And you get so paranoid. Like I say, the second jump was probably the scariest moment of my life, walking to the end of that ramp, waiting to get sucked out, because you know what's going to happen. And all this stuff is just going through your head. And then the third jump, I was fine. It's like, oh, okay. So there was that. And then the Q course is the qualification course for Special Forces in the Army. And it's just this long, grueling, part physical, part head game, where they push you to your limit. A lot of training, but it's a lot of just, you're running, you're humping, you're ruck, you're constantly on the move. They're keeping you tired. They're trying to play mental games with you. And by that point in my career, you're in really good physical shape. So they're really trying to, break you down mentally. Can you deal with the stress? Can you deal with, trying to make good decisions after you've been up 48, 72 hours with, minimal sleep, and you're tired and you're dirty and you're hungry, and it was interesting. Once I figured out it was just kind of a head game, it became really easy. But before then, and that was probably about halfway through, before then you're seeing your friends drop out. They're just pushing you, they're in your face, just pushing, and you're thinking you're never going to make it. You're just not going to make it. And like I said, then the light bulb comes on, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's tough, but it's a game. It's like I say, they're trying to mess with your mind, and then then it became easier. It was still a hard course, but like I say, you get that realization of it's doable. It's just a game. They're trying to make sure that when you get into a real life situation and you've been up for 72 hours and you got to hump 25 miles and your life is on the line and your team's life is on the line, you can make the right decisions. good course. Like I say, I know it's nothing like the SEALs, the buds and that, but for the Army, pretty crazy. It's a little scary. I don't know if I'd want to do it again, even though I know what would be coming, but no.
So, what life lessons did you take away from your training?
That cocoa's good. I'd say I was a smartass. The class clown growing up. Never felt really challenged in school, so I was disruptive. If I was growing up today, they would probably give me the little ADD drugs and say, yeah, he's a problem child. Back then, you're just a class clown. You go to the detention and stuff like that. And what I realized, I think what it taught me was that I need to be challenged. I need some structure. But two, I need to be challenged in what I'm doing. That if it's too easy, I get bored. Also that, there's a time and place where you can joke around. Then there's a time and place where you got to be very serious. And I think that, was really translated through, my whole career. And the other thing was how you effectively lead a team. Everything on how I've run as I've gotten into the business world, how I've worked every job I've had, whether just me working for somebody else when I was starting out, or as I started having people working for me, all the skills that I learned and use today in business are the skills I learned when I was in the Army. How do you manage a team? How do you, coach and mentor, and how do you just lead? And I don't think it's something that you can just read a book and say, oh, this is how you become a great leader. It's something you have to, really experience and try and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and what's your style. And I think some people can be great leaders, other people not so much. They're more of a follower. But it did teach me, that I can still have fun, be a fun boss, but still be a leader. I say I push my teams hard, I always have, but we've had fun. And I say, so I think all those things that I learned, how far I could push myself, when I could be funny, when I had to be serious, how I lead, how I teach, it's all stuff that came from the military, and I think it was one of the greatest educational experiences I ever had. Just fantastic.
Describe the moment you're most proud of.
Oh, it's probably at my dad's funeral. My dad had served, let's say he was an immigrant. He served in the Korean War. And at his funeral, we had a military honor guard there. And that was really cool. It was, knowing that he had served honorably and what he had sacrificed, and, that I had followed in his footsteps and, had done my part, for the country. It's really good.
What is your most vivid memory?
That parachute jump I was talking about, that second one, that was unforgettable. That was like, that sheer moment of terror as I was walking out the back of that plane. That I can still visualize today. That was probably one of the most vivid things.
Name a time you were most scared.
It was probably in the Sinai Peninsula, and we were out on a just normal routine patrol, and we had stopped to have some lunch, and one of my guys had walked out, heading towards the ocean, towards the Mediterranean Sea, and he had wandered into a minefield without knowing it, and you know, working out how we were going to get him out of there and walking, you know, that I thought I was going to lose one of my guys, you know, for something really stupid. And I say, because it's all up, at that point it was all up to my decisions, what, you know, what I had him do, how we were going to do everything. And it was, you know, one of the first times I was really in kind of like any area that was really dangerous, and I had responsibility. So, you know, all these things are going through your head, you know, about your training and what you learned, and, you know, am I going to make the right decision? And you got all these doubts, and you just got to kind of push it away, and you know, because they're counting on you. And it was very, very stressful, you know, to try to figure out, you know, not second guess yourself and make all these right decisions. You survived, you got out of there. But I think, you know, you just, I was, oof. At least I was just really rattled that day. You know, didn't sleep that night, and, you know, you're just thinking, what did I get myself into? You know, it's, because I don't think, you know, it doesn't matter what the training is and how long they train you, and everything you go through until you actually, you know, either end up in a firefight or in a real life situation. It's not real. You know, it's not real until it's real, and you don't know how you're going to react. And yeah, scary.
Was there a personal item that you carried with you on every mission?
I had a little diary, notebook, journal, whatever you want to call it. I guess girls have diaries, men have journals. You know, I had a journal, and I wrote in it multiple times a day, and that I carried with me. You know, I always had a journal with me my whole career, and actually I've gone through it a few times, you know, since I've been out. It's really interesting reading what I wrote, you know, all those years ago. That was always with me.
What did you miss most about home while you were away?
Reese's peanut butter cups. You joke. I mean, that was really, you know, you kids don't get it. You're in the land of Skype and instant messaging and Instagram and Snapchat. You know, back then, you know, I couldn't, you know, just order something from Amazon and have it delivered, you know, anywhere in the world. There, you know, it was care packages and letters, real letters, you know, with a stamp, and, you know, and they would take forever to get there. Yeah, I remember even when I was in Germany, you know, I'd send letters back and forth and, you know, get things fairly regularly. And I wouldn't talk to my parents very often because, you know, the cost to make a phone call back then was, you know, outrageous from overseas phone calls. And I would have to save up for maybe 3 or 4 months and then go down to the German post office and you make a phone call. And you'd pay out like 30, 40, 50 marks, which at that time was, you know, like 10, 15, $20, depending how long you wanted to talk, which, you know, when you're making, you know, $700 a month, that's a lot of money to make a phone call. So the little care packages, and I always, Reese's peanut butter cups, that was like, thank you. I miss that from the U.S. It's like, I still like my Reese's.
So, besides Reese's peanut butter cups, what was the best thing you got in a care package?
God, you're making me go back and remember.
That's hard.
It was a long time ago. Probably some of the books that my mom sent. You know, she always knew I loved to read, and I've always been a reader. And I think, you know, getting, you know, she'd find a book that she liked, and she'd, you know, send me a copy. And those were always really nice, because that was something that, let's say, you know, it was before the age of internet, you know, working overseas in some of these little podunk countries that we're in, you know, some of them times you didn't have electricity, so a book was quite handy. And, you know, you could spend a lot of hours just kind of escape, you know, into the book, into the story. and that was always just, it was a well-received gift because it was, like I say, a little bit of home, a little bit of an escape, and just something you could carry around with you no matter what. Didn't require batteries, then you could just use it anywhere. And those were always nice gifts.
How did you end up on Cape Cod?
Oh, that was my second career in the tech industry. I was working for Lucent Technologies, and we had bought a company here in Hyannis, and me and my wife were living in London. And we'd been I was traveling back and forth, and got to know Cape Cod. So then, a bit later in my career, I was working for Cisco Systems, and again, we were still overseas, and they said, well, you got a choice. You could be San Jose, Raleigh-Durham, or Boston. And Catherine went down and checked out Raleigh-Durham. Nah. We both knew what San Jose was like. Nah. And I was like, nah, Boston, New England's nice. I said, the Cape is great. I said, it's close enough to Boston, I can get to the airport. So we ended up in Boston, well, Cape Cod. And we really like it. But then Cisco promptly sent me back to London for a big project with BT. So this has always been our home base now for the last 14 years. And it's really nice, great sense of community, really nice people. Brewster's a cool little town. Sometimes we're reminded we're Washington, but the people are really nice, and it's really nice climate, except when we get to the nor'easters. That's what we got here, kind of a roundabout way.
Do you have any advice for someone my age who wants to join the military?
Do it for the right reasons. That's probably the biggest thing. Know that when you're joining, you are actually signing up to risk your life, and you may end up giving your life for your country. I've had some good friends that have had that happen. It's a great experience, but know what you're getting into. I think the world has gotten to be a bit more dangerous. Things are much more in the news today, where I think when I was growing up, I didn't realize all the little things that were going on, so I probably went in a little naive. But I think your generation, you see what's going on, the issues with terrorism, and where we're involved and what's going on, North Korea, various things. So just go in with your eyes wide open. But it can be the best experience of your life. You'll have life experiences that you'll get nowhere else. You'll make friends that will be friends of yours forever. But you'll also probably have some of the biggest heartaches you'll ever have because you probably lose a friend or two. But I think it's worth the sacrifice. We got a great country. We have our issues, but it's still a great country.
Is there anything else you would like to say that I didn't ask you?
Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the interview.